Hi Dave, you alright? We're just here today, mate, to ask you a few questions about how you got into pigeons and stuff, and basically like pick your brains out about the Birmingham roller. What made you get into rollers in the first place?
I've done it for it was part of life in them days when I grew up. That's what you did. But like you are now with computer games and stuff like that, we were like the same thing with pigeons. Well, I mean, there'd be 10 or 15 sheds in our block. And when we were on a council estate when we were kids. And like, it's been a natural thing, didn't care what you kept, as long as you got pigeons in your house. Yeah. And I've had them ever since. Never had a day without them.
How long has it been? It's been like 30 years, 40 years, or?
Since we're 10. I'm
Bloody
getting on 67 now.
Long time, isn't it?
Wow.
It's been part of your life for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, shit sticks, doesn't it? They seem to have stuck to me.
My dad used to do it, didn't he?
Yeah. My dad was the same. I mean, my dad had a shed there and it was 3 foot off floor. And we built a shed underneath it. And that was ours underneath it. We used to crawl in and out it to get our birds out. Yeah. And it was what that was the only thing we knew what to do. Like they are now, stuck in houses every day. We were all over fields and everywhere. And we used to get lost and we had to ring people up to find out where we were and to get back home. Yeah. And it's learns you a lot. It learns you the way of life, doesn't it?
Dave, like as you know nowadays, there are like quite a few strains about and stuff, so like people have like different ways of keeping them and stuff, but personally, how would you yourself, what do you class as like when you got perfect competition bird, or would you say decent competition bird?
Yeah. There's never a perfect competition bird, right? Anybody that says there is bullshit. Because every pigeon changes all the way through its life. It's like you can pick a young'un out that'd be the best thing since sliced bread, but by the time it's 2 years old, it could be a pile of shit. It could. But the most good, but the best birds you'll ever get are them birds that are there all the time. They're not flash, they're not brilliant, but they're there. They do the job. They're the birds that'll be there a long time. You know, them birds you don't notice in your kit. You take no notice of. You take no notice of them because they're good. You know, all these pigeons that come out, and you see these fantastic rollers. You up Middlesbrough, everyone's got a super duper young bird kit, but the following year they got no yearlings. Why have they got no yearlings? Because they're no good. Because they're all dead. Or they've killed them because they ain't good enough. I'd certainly have 25 decent pigeons and 100 bad ones. And that's where it comes from. It ain't a matter of just getting some pigeon and putting them together. When you're breeding a strain, you're breeding a strain that you know all about. You know, I mean, when I start looking at them to pair them up here, I look at them 3 or 4 months before I even do it. And then I'll look through and see what needs to be paired up and what don't need to be paired up. And I'll see what I need in the shed and what I don't need. If I've got a cock there that I've got 2 or 3 brothers to in the kit, I won't use them. They'll stay in the kit. Because it's already in the shed, you can't put it in there twice. There's no need. I mean, it's all right banging a load of pigeons in. I've done it this year. Every year I've bred from 6, 7 pair at the most. It got to the stage this year where I got a load of old birds that were going on. There were 5, 6, 4-year-old, and I'd never bred off them. There's no need to. So some of the older stock birds are going old. The 10, 11, 9, 10. They're all around 7, 8 years old anyway. So I paired all them flyers up and I kept them all in individual boxes. So I knew exactly what come off of which bears. And I flew them out, well, started to fly them out. They've been up in the air about, I don't know, 6, 7 weeks now. And they're starting to show. And when they let go, I think there'll be some decent birds in them. I've picked 2 or 3 out already, but it's whether them 2 or 3 are there next year. It's no good looking at them what they're doing this year. It's what comes after that, it is. That's what tells you what's any good and what ain't any good. I've got a strict regime where if it lands on the roof or it lands on that pylon or it lands in wherever it lands, it goes in the dustbin. You don't stay here, you don't. Because once you get one landing there, you get another one landing there, and another one. So you don't want it. So like, I don't care how good it is. I don't. That white in Utah, they spin the bollocks off, but it's no good having one that's going to land up there or land up there or land anywhere else.
Dave, tell us about that kit what landed on the garage last time.
I had a kit flying last year and it was very good. They were. I'd trained them young birds. I'd had them up in the air for 4 months, not done a thing wrong, and they were going really well. Tight as out in the kit, you'd never get one out of the kit. And if one bird done something, they all done it. And I put 3 new youngsters on top of the shed, they'd never been out. When they were coming down, the young ones took up into them and landed on that big house over there. They did. And all the rest landed there. And by 10 o'clock the next morning, there weren't one of them here, they were all gone. Oh. And they're all gone because they'd done something wrong.
Is that what you've done from like an early age or like as you got older?
It stems from the tipplers. I mean, when I was flying tipplers, I flew tipplers for 20 odd years. And I've done all right with them. But it stems from there because if a tippler went wrong or one in a team went wrong and you didn't know which one it was, you've got to kill the team. And that was the end of it. I mean, if it didn't matter what he'd done wrong, it was wrong. And you can guarantee if you flew that bird for the next 3 years and it never made a mistake, when you start to put that bird under pressure, it will go straight back to where it come from. It will. Whatever roof it landed on, it'll always land on that roof again. And no matter how many years it is that it happens, it does. So that's where it's all come from. That's where the strictness has come from. And it's like when you pair pigeons up, you look for the background in them. You look for whether they're timid or whether they're like relaxed or whether they're settled in the shed. Whether you have to. There's one in there now. He's going to end up dead. There's a check pied in there. Every time you open the door, bump, it's out. It is. It won't last. It won't. Because it's not what I want. I don't want birds like that. I don't. They've got to be something that I want, and they've got to be as I want them, not as they want to be. Because if it ain't like I want them, then I don't want them. There's no point in keeping birds like that. You do this job, and you do it for years. And year after year after year, you find something else new about them. You do. And it don't matter how long you keep them for, you'll always find something different. It's like breeding. When you go into breeding and you go into maintenance of your breeding, right? You'll have books that go back years. So you'll look at them books. But what you've got to realise, them old stock birds you've got, everything you've got off of them, right, becomes stock birds. And everything that you got off them pigeons that become stock birds, then become stock birds again. It may take 5 or 6 years to do. But then when you look into the background of the pigeon, you've got to look how close they are between the whole lot of them. Not just one pair, whether it's a flat pair or that pair. Because through the generations, you can be going too close. You can. So you've got to keep them as far apart as you can. And the reason you keep them as far apart as you can is because your genetics will last longer. And the strain will last longer. It will. If you keep going brother to sister, aunt to uncle, in the end, you're going to end up with pigeons as nuts. Every now and again I'll do it. I put my hands up to it. I do. And I'm, like this year, I've ended up with some pigeons in there that's got no fucking feathers on them. They've grew, but they've got no feathers on them. Eventually, I mean, I was killing them, and then it come to me, I thought, well, why is it like that? Will they ever grow? So I left them, left a pair of youngsters. Understand they grew the wing flights, they grew the tail, and they grew a few feathers around the edge. Now, by the time they started eating, they'd not got one feather on the body, or the wings, and they're eating. But by the time I come to take them away with the others, they were fully feathered. And don't ask me why, but the feathers come through and they grew in weeks. But at least now I know that whether they're right or wrong, you can fly them. And people just kill and kill and kill. They don't look for the problem. And when I looked at the background of them birds, I'd gone too close, too many times. And that's what caused it. I mean, I had it one year where every pissing pigeon that come out got something wrong with it. But I've never bred a pigeon that won't fly. Every one of them fly. And most of them roll. And that's the way it has to be.
Obviously, Dave, there is, like I said, once again, there is like quite a few strains going about at the moment, and there's like
a lot of very good strains.
They're like different fanciers, and there's like each to their own. What qualities do you need to have in a bird yourself to say that that bird deserves a chance in your stock lot?
It's got to be a very good bird. It has, and it's got to last the time. It has. Well, I won't say I never used a yearling. I've used one last year, but that was the first time in, for as long as I can remember. Normally I'd want at least 3 or 4 years flying out of them, I would. And they'd have to be very stable birds. And when you come to the point of looking at them as if they're good enough to put in stock, then you look in the background of them. You do. You look to see if you need it in the stock loft. Now, if it turns out that you need it in the stock loft, then you look at its attributes in the air, what it can do and what it can't do, and how much pressure you can put it on before it breaks, whether it can roll when it's in good condition, whether it can roll when it's in a mediocre condition, and whether it can roll straight and true when it's in a poor condition. Now, if it can't do all of them things, you might as well throw it in a bin, because it's not going to do what you want it to do, is it? It's ain't. There's loads of people that I know that put pigeons in willy-nilly, and well, I just can't see the point of it. I can't. You'll never see a load of birds in my shed. You'll never see 7 or 8 kits, or 6 kits. You'll never see it, because there ain't that many pigeons that good. I mean, and if you go to these houses where they've got kits all over the place, I'm sorry, but there's only one good kit, and that's your main kit. You've only got one good kit of young birds, because you're putting them together, you're building them. You've only got one good kit of yearlings, because they're the best that you bred last year. They are. And they're the best that you think can go forward. Now, this year I've lent quite a few yearlings out, and it's left me short, because I only had 26, I did, and I've got to think about, I can manage to put 15 or 16 together, but I've lent a lot out. But you take the fact that when they come back, it's whether they're going to be any good when they come back. It's whether you can get them up in the air again and get them doing what you want them to do. That's the difference, because I've seen a lot of pigeons come out of yearlings and they've bred off of them, and then they've fetched them out to fly them again, and they ain't worth 2 bob. You can't even get off a shed without rolling and hitting something. And it's true, that's what happens. And they're supposed to be the things that's bred you your future. A lot of the English people, when it comes to flying, they turn around to you and say, we can't fly in April or May because our birds are in stock. And you, well, what's the difference? Ain't them birds that are in stock producing you as good as what you've got in the air? If they ain't doing that, what they're doing in stock? Because they ain't no good, are they? You can't put a team up in the air without using your stock birds. There's got to be something fucking wrong.
Something's not right, is it?
There is. And a lot of people do that. And it's like sales when you come to start selling pigeons. If you've got, well, I know people that's took the piss out of other people when they've sold them, and there's no need for it. I mean, if somebody comes to me that I don't know, I'll charge them for them. I will. But once I've charged them that once, if I get to know them properly, I don't pay for nothing else. And they'll take some very good birds from here. But I mean, you can't get them a lot because you ain't got a lot. Because nobody's got that many good fucking birds. England's got the best birds in the world, I think. And they've got some of the best strains in the world. Yeah. And you've got some of the most educated people as far as rollers are concerned in the world. But a lot of them won't tell you what actually they do or why they do it. You can get some people that will come along and they'll buy kitty youngsters, right? And they'll say to me, like you do, ring me up, whatever I do here. But you're not me. See what I mean? I can look at them pigeons in that kit box and I think to myself, no, we've got to do something with them. Or we've got to slow the corn down. Or we've got to take the feed off of them. And you can't do that. When you fly them in the air, you're watching your kit. And you know what you've got to do to adjust them. You do. But you don't know what day you've got to do it on. You don't. So you can't turn around and say to somebody and say, right, you've got to feed that day and they're going to do that day. Impossible. It is. Because you don't know yourself. There's so much change in a kit when it comes to flying them. When you come to flying a kit, weather conditions can change. Everything can upset that kit, so it's no good on the day. Loads of different things. But if you've got pigeons that will work in a team without too much adjusting, then you've got a good chance. Yeah. If you've got to adjust everything and keep changing everything, you've got no chance. Yeah. Because it won't work. And if you've got birds that you've got to knock them right down to make them work, you can do that and they will work, but they'll only work for 5-10 minutes and then they'll go flat. They will. And they'll go as flat as a pancake. The only way you can do that successfully, where you knock them down, is to bring them right down, and then 3 or 4 days before you fly them, you've got to build them back up a bit. So they've got some energy. 2 years ago, I was flying young ones in the All England, right? They're supposed to have been here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We get up to the fly that were flying before me, and he turned around to me and says, I'm not going to be at your house for at least 4 hours, because I've got to go Cumbria first. So that meant that my birds were going to be 4.5 hours behind, 5 hours. So I come back here, I walked in the shed, and one of the youngsters come to the front of the bars. My pigeons never come to the bars. And so what I did is I got a quarter of a tin of wheat, put it on the floor, and I fed the whole lot of them. That just took the edge off the younger for them. And they come out and they come second. But if you don't know that sort of thing, if you're not clever enough to see what the problem is, or you ain't had birds long enough to see what the problem is, then you do things wrong. We all do things wrong. I do things wrong now. And you know when you're doing it wrong, you do. And then you think to yourself, what a twat, why have I done that? But most of it is when you get older or you get to my stage, you can't be bothered. You can't. And that's the God's honest truth. You'll set your kit up, you'll set them up for the All England or something like that. And you get so far through it and we'll go out. Well, and you're supposed to feed them at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. We don't come back. You don't till 10 o'clock at night. And you feed them then. And all these things that you do don't seem to make a lot of difference, but it makes a lot of difference when you come to fly them. It does. It makes a massive difference. And if you don't realise what you're doing when you're doing it, you'll never be any good. There's a lot of people in this game that think they're good. There is. And there's a lot of people that follow. And they'll follow. And there's a lot of chasers in it where he won last year, so I want some of his birds. So they'll go and get them. And the next year there'll be somebody else who win. And they'll go and get them. But what they don't seem to understand is you'll get a kit of pigeons that gel. And they'll come together and they'll start working. There'll be a good team of pigeons. Well, alright? And for 2 or 3 years that person will win. And he'll win with that team. But what happens to that team is one will bump and you drop out, then they'll put somebody else in. Then somebody else will go wrong and all could take one. And before you know it, there's 4 or 5 of them birds, and there's perhaps the major birds in the kit that you need, right, are gone. And that kit will never be the same again. So what happens is they fade off, and you do it, somebody else starts to win. And that's how it works. Darren Deacon's perhaps been the most successful bloke in England for the last few years, yes, because he's done the job right, yes. He don't mess about, he spends a lot of time on his birds and he works hard on them. And don't get from who tells you any different. If you look at the results and look at them results properly, he's the one that's won most in the last 5 years, yeah. Nobody else. And you get all these people that think of God. It don't work in my eyes. If somebody...
So Dave, when you just mentioned Darren Deacon, and you said that he's doing things right, just like to let the viewers obviously listen to what you mean, like explain what do you mean when you say he's like done stuff right, like right in what sense?
Well, he's got a regime, he's got something that he works to, and that's what he works to, and that's how it works. And he knows that programme that he's working on will keep them pigeons in the right order. I mean, I went down judging them last week, and well, it wasn't last week, the week before, and they were crap. They were no good at all. Right. And he turned around and gave me a bit of paper, and on this bit of paper he got something like 26 breaks that he'd flew them on the Tuesday, right, and they were good. And I turned around to me and I said, well, you got it wrong then, didn't you? He went, what do you mean? I said, well, no good showing me that what they've done on Tuesday. I want to see that on Sunday. I said, so you got it wrong.
Hands up, mistakes done, yeah.
I said, if you dropped a bollock, tell us you dropped a bollock, don't leave it in there.
Professor, anything you want to ask you?
Oh no, that's it.
Abdul?
Yeah, so...
Just ask him anything you want.
Flying a kit and setting a kit up, right? You don't just take pigeons from that year and slowly. I don't care if you put them this day where it's windy and can't let them out, I won't let them out. And I keep them in good condition, I'll keep the body weight on them, so that when they develop, and they develop as youngsters, they develop with the strength that they need to accept the role when it comes onto them. It's all right forcing them into the role by not feeding them or knocking them down or keeping them on a low diet, right? What you're actually doing is you're forcing them onto the roll, and all of a sudden they'll come on the roll and they can't handle it. They ain't got the body strength to do it. Yeah. And that's when you see them going all tits up. If that pigeon's strong enough, it'll come on the roll and it'll come on the roll naturally. It will. And then when it comes on the roll naturally, it'll have a body strength to handle it. I've got one in there, a little red white like now. It's only been up in the air for a week, Dad. And it's flick, flick, flick all the time. It can't stop itself. And then it'll do 2 or 3 little flicks. It will. But when it lands on that shed, right, it's been up in the air the same time as all the rest. But it's crackers. Because when it tries to go in the shed, every time it takes off, it flicks. It does. It perhaps takes it 20 times to get back in the shed. But I'll never change that pigeon. It'll be there until it either learns to control it or it kills itself. I've never been a bloke that walks in the shed and picks them all up. You see them come out the sheds and they've got pigeons stuffed under their arms and everywhere, and then they're frying them all up. If it can't go out that shed on its own and go up in the air and go back in the shed on its own, it ain't worth fucking having. It ain't. Because if you've got to go and mess about, and a pigeon like that, if I were judging, would never get best individual for me. I don't care how good it is in the air, but if you've got to throw it up, it ain't no good. It ain't. They should come out that shed on their own and should go back in it. And if anything that rolls on, I never told people, you never see me tell somebody to stand and watch them, see if they roll down. If they roll down and they kill themselves, that's their own fault. Shouldn't do it. They shouldn't. Because that's what you want. You want 20 rollers that can do the job as a team. But you ain't got to worry about. You ain't got to wonder whether they're going to crash when they come in. And I mean, you get it with young ones, you get it with old ones. I've got an old cock out there that's not been out for about, since last September, and I just started laying them out last week. First time he landed on the shed, great. Second time, just clipped, missed. He never hit out, you were near. The third time, he clouted the roof of the shed. And it stood there looking all sad for itself. But when I had the chance next time, it weren't so keen on clouting the shed because it didn't want to come down. It didn't. And it won't come down till it's actually everything else had dropped and it could take its time. And then it landed. But eventually that pigeon will end up dead. It will. I've seen people breed off pigeons like that. Oh, I put it in stock off, it's 3-year-old. What good's that? No good, is it? It's like when you're pairing pigeons up. You've got to have a good stock loft. You want pigeons that you can pair up and circulate round the stock loft. It's no good having click pairs, because them click pairs will only breed you a certain number of pigeons. And then you've got to hope that you can breed off them click pairs to something else. In my stock loft I can move, let's say I've got 7 pair of stock, I can move any one of them ends onto any one of the cocks and produce. I'm not saying a world champion, I'm talking about a decent roller. And there's a lot of people, there were a lad from America, it's on my phone now. He got in touch with me last week. They were in competition, I think it's America, it could be Canada. They were in competition, flew in competition, and a bird got picked out. And the judge turned around to him and said it's the fastest bird he's ever seen in his life. And it was bred through mine. I can show you that on there. I can. It was bred through my bird. And he said it was fast, he said it's, the judge gave it the highest quality and the highest depth that he'd ever given out in the time he'd been judging. But I'm not bragging about it. It's just one of them things. The next one he breeds could be a bag of shit. It could. Because you can never get two the same. when you start breeding, you've got to have a shed that looks good and that it's there that you can move up and about. Now, when you look at them pigeons in your flying shed, right, and you got somebody that comes up to you and they want some birds, right, the first question that bloke who's come up to you and asking you for birds, first thing he wants to know is these birds in here bred from your stock bird? And you say yes or no, right, and then you turn around to him and you pick a bird out that you like, and then you'll ask him if you could look at the stock book and see how far that pigeon goes back. And if it goes back and it's a decent bird, then you buy it, or you leave it where it is, or you don't touch it and you get to know that man, so that when you do actually start to look for birds that you want, he'll supply you with something that's worth having, not something that's not worth a two bob. Because that's what most people do, go out and buy birds, and they'll buy them here, there and everywhere. Your brother was a fine example. He went all over fucking New Mexico looking for pigeons and ended up with a bag of shit at the end of it. He did. But they weren't all bad. A lot of it was bad because his management was bad. You can't always blame the pigeon. You've got to blame it yourself. 90% of flying birds is down to how you do them, right, and how you fly them. A lot of it is that if you've got bad management, whereas you let them out, you walk away, the land, they're all over the garden, you get them in an hour later, that's no good. If these go up in there, they'll land, they'll go in that shed. And if they don't go in the shed, they don't get fed. Simple as that. And the next time they come down, they'll go in the shed. It sounds hard, but it's not hard, it's simple. Once you've got them into a routine, and them birds know exactly what you're doing with them, they'll do it themselves. Well, my old birds, if I chucked a gallon of grubber to them now, right, they'd perhaps laugh at me. But because they don't need it. They don't, because they get fed properly every time I feed them. I mean, I've had them where I've walked in the shed and they're at the stage where they're that good a nick. I've opened my kitbox to feed them, right, because I feed on the floor. I won't even come out of the kitbox. They've come out, they've hovered over the top line and gone back in the kitbox. So I've shut the door and left them. And they get fed the next day. They'll come out the next day. They will. But that's condition. When you've got birds like that, you've got them too high. They're in too good a condition. Right? And all I want to do is tread everything inside. If I went in that shed now and let them old on the floor, right, and you stood and watched them, they'd eat for 5 minutes and the cocks would be trying to jump all over everything in front of it and tread it. They would. But if I let them out, they'll still roll. Well, because it's the way they're selected. In anything that you do, it's down to management, and if you manage them properly and you work with them birds properly, you'll never get it wrong. You won't have a winning team, you won't perhaps come first, but if somebody comes into your garden, right, and you put a kit up in the air that's been managed properly, that flies properly, that kits properly, and a break, right, regardless whether they break once, twice or 3 times, if there's something in that kit that shows where it rolls straight, finishes properly, you'll get people comment on it. You will. His brother, first time he flew his young ones, he flew them against old ones. He come second with him. I'm getting people ringing me up telling me how good his pigeons were. Oh, but they're only good because he's listened. Patchy was a good lad. I mean, he come up and he asked me to help him. I said yes, but and I told him there and then, I said, it's not going to be you just coming up here and buying some birds. I said, it's going to take a long time. And it took 2 or 3 years because he'd come up, I'd set him up with somebody else and somebody else to breed. And in the end, he got some pigeons worth watching. and he got the nice speed, he got nice depth of them, and they were good birds. He's the same. He come up and he asked me for a cock. He said, the stock cock that had been stocked for 2 or 3 years, and he'd bred some fantastic pigeons. And he liked it, so I give it him. And unless you're prepared to help somebody, don't even bother bringing them in your garden, because there's no point. I get loads of people ask me birds every year, and I mean loads of people. But you can't supply them. Because if you turn around to them and say you can supply them with this, that and the other, and you're selling hundreds of birds, then, you know, I don't know where you won't get it from. I've bred this year the most I've ever bred in my life. I have. I've bred you 10, I've bred Barney 10, I've bred Matt 10, I've bred an old boy in, what do you call it, he's about 10. But I'm not charging them for them. I'm not charging them silly money or anything like that. Because I don't think you need to. I don't. Tank's had 20. But I've told him if he gets rid of them, I want them back. Because he comes every year, he has birds, and they disappear after about 2 or 3 weeks. You never see them again. You know. And I told him this time, if he has them, come back here. Because I know what I can do with them. That's what all you're going to need to do. Is bed. And rollers are a good hobby if you don't try and be the big man in the world, because you'll never be a big man in the world for long. You know.
Right, Dave. Thanks for your time, mate, and all the knowledge you shared. And I hope the people that start keeping them in the future learn off this interview. And
it doesn't matter if they learn or they don't
thanks once again, mate.
It's what it is. What you do is what you do. It doesn't matter what somebody else thinks.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Don't.